Good morning. Today's Friday. It is the 24th day of Sivan, and we continue in chapter 7 in Shaar Hayichud VeHaemuna, the part of the Tanya that talks about the unity, the oneness of God, faith, very fundamental part of the Tanya, and the chapter 7 is indeed a very deep one, and which is discussing the concept of tzimtzum, God's concealment, contraction, and it is important to understand this, because this really gives us, the more we understand the reality, the true reality that Hashem, God, is everything, and we are really in existence only by the fact that God makes us exist. We don't have our own independent existence, which is something that takes a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of studying and repeating it and to contemplate this concept. The more we understand it, this will be a life changer. It changes everything in life. When you realize that what is your true reality, what is the true reality of the world, it enhances our behavior between us and God. It enhances our behavior between humans when we see the real focus. And this is what the Torah tells us, that we need to, part of the mitzvah is, you should know and you should take it to heart, that God is God in heaven above and in earth below. There's nothing else. So the Alter Rebbe focuses on this thing very much in this part of the Tanya. And in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe was talking about a misunderstanding of some Torah scholars in the time of the Alter Rebbe, that they misunderstood a statement of the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the Ari, that wrote, was you can say the father of modern Kabbalah, and he explains the concept of God bringing his light into this world, and he uses the term that Silek, that God sort of removed himself, and they misunderstood it and they took it literally. And of course, they believe that God controls the world and everything, but they figure that the way they understood what Arizal says, that God controls it, but from a distance. And being that God is infinite, and they took it in literal sense, that in order to have something, you need to have some, in order to have the light of something permeate, you need to have a vessel. So, for example, you have the idea of an intellect, a thought, an idea. The idea is obviously not limited in space. The idea is true. 1 + 1 is true in America and is true in Israel at the same time. But the idea needs a place to dwell. It needs intellect. It needs a brain. The idea cannot be in a rock, in a wood. It doesn't. It's not a vessel for the idea. The idea needs an intellect. So the same thing they would say, God needs a vessel to be. And this world is so low and so down, it's not a vessel for Hashem's being. And that's the Alter Rebbe, in different words, explained that this is an absolutely terrible mistake. And Alter Rebbe says, may God forgive them for the mistakes. And he explained that the whole meaning, what the Arizal says, that God removed his light, it is a removal from our perspective, meaning that he removed himself so that we don't see him. It's like he concealed himself from us. But, as we learned in the previous lessons, that the Rebbe explained it both logically, that God has to be in every part of us because he's everything. And by knowing us, his knowledge, his being us. Hashem with his knowledge is one. So when God knows us, he is us. That means every part of us is here only because Hashem makes us here. And also, Alter Rebbe brought also from the Zohar, quoted from different places, which is also way before the Arizal, that explains that Hashem is in every place. There's no such thing as a place void of Hashem, except the Tzimtzum, the Arizal speaks about. The contraction is a contraction that he removed his light from our perspective. So this is what the Alter Rebbe continues now explaining. This also explains the idea when we're saying that there is the concept of Memale Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. That Hashem encompasses the world, and Hashem is in every part of the world, fills the worlds. And this also needs to be understood in what does it mean? What does it mean Hashem encompasses the world? That it doesn't mean literally Hashem is surrounding the world, that is not here. And here the Alter Rebbe also brings some examples to understand this better. So let's look inside what the Alter Rebbe says in today's shir. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, "V'zehu gam kein inyan sovev kol almin." And this is also the meaning of He encompasses all worlds. So say this doesn't mean to say, God forbid, that God is not found within the world, but merely encompasses them. What does it mean, rather? It says, Pirush, Derech Moshe. For example, Keshe'odam izboinen be'eze dvar chochma b'sichloi, oy dover gashmi b'machshavtoi. This means, by way of analogy, when a person reflects upon an intellectual subject in his mind or upon a physical object in his thoughts, you think about an idea, you think about an object, think about a cup. So now you have the cup in your mind, the image of the cup. So he says, Azai sichloi umachshavtoi makifim aladovo. Then his intellect and thought encompasses the object. Aladovo hu ametzuya b'machshavtoi oy b'sichloi. This image is formed in his thoughts and in his mind, inasmuch as they are found within his thought and mind. So this cup is now in my mind. I have this image in my mind. However, is the cup literally in my mind? Physically, obviously not. But his intellect and thought, don't encompass that subject in actual fact. So this is when we're talking about humans. Human thoughts, you can have something that encompasses, but it doesn't literally encompass. But when talking about Hashem, we're talking about God encompassing the world. But the Holy One, blessed be He, however, of whom it is written, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. Machshavtoi ve'yediyosoi sheyodeya kol hanivroim makefes kol nivro v'nivro b'poel mamash. So his thoughts and knowledge of all created beings actually encompasses each and every creature. Sharehi chayusoi v'isavusoi me'ayin leyesh b'poel mamash. Because God's knowledge is the very life force that which brings it into existence, out of nothingness, in actual reality. So as we said in earlier lessons, that the knowledge of God knows something because He is something. His knowledge is one with Him. So Hashem knowing the object is the life of the object. Now there is the life force that you have in generally bringing life to everything. Then you have also each individual creature needs a specific level of energy. You have certain energy that comes to vegetations. You have a different type of energy that comes to inanimate objects, to a rock, to water. You have more different type of energy that comes to the animals, and so to humans, and so on. So you need also what is called the memale kol almin, that Hashem fills all worlds. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, "Umemale kol almin," and He fills all worlds. What does it mean? He bechinas hachayus amislabeshes toich etzem hanivra. This is the life force that becomes enclosed, meaning internalized, within the essence of the created being. Now, this type of life is very, very much limited and reduced and contracted to each particular creature, what this creature needs. That's what he explains. It is powerfully contracted within it according to the intrinsic nature of the created beings. Each created being is finite and limited in quantity and quality. Quality, meaning its significance and importance. And Alter Rebbe brings an example, the example of the sun. The sun is a created being, very, very powerful. However powerful it is still limited. It is still finite. So he explains, for example, the sun, shegufoi yeshloi gvul v'tachlis bekamusoi. For example, the sun, whose body is finite and limited quantitatively. That being approximately 167 times the size of the globe of the earth. So this is the quantity. It is limited. And the same thing also, in the quantity, it's also limited. And whose quality and significance, namely its light, this is also limited. The light, which is the quality of the sun, this is also limited as to the extent that it can emit light. It cannot, because it cannot illuminate indefinitely, since it is a created being. You know, the sun is in exactly the right place. If the sun would be a little further than from the earth than what is it, we will all freeze. If it will be a little closer, we will all burn. So the sun has its limits, how far it goes. The same thing is says the Alter Rebbe, v'chein kol hanivroim hem balei gvul v'tachlis. Likewise, all created beings are finite and limited. Because from the earth to heaven, there's a journey of 500 years. 500 years to come from walking from earth to heaven, chulu and so on. It says from heaven to another heaven is also the distance of 500 years. And therefore, achayus amelubeshes bahem ibibchinas tzimtzum rav ve'otzim. So therefore, since created beings are finite and limited, the life force which is invested in them is greatly and powerfully contracted. Because it must first undergo numerous and powerful contractions until the created beings, by nature finite and limited, may be brought into existence. The created, the limited, finite created beings, until they become into existence from its power and light. So this is only after this process of self-limitation will the limitless life force be able to invest itself within the finite created beings and become united with them, as will soon be explained. And this is the end of today's shir, giving us once again a little further, deeper understanding of what it means, where we come from, and how we are so limited and in understanding. And yet we do understand, and we do repeat this in our mind and thinking, understanding that we are all the existence because Hashem makes us exist every day. And the fact that we don't see it, it doesn't mean that Hashem is not here. He's everywhere. He just removes himself from our understanding so we can feel ourselves a self-existence. And so the removal is real. The removal of the light is real, and that is why. What is our job? It is real in our perspective, but it is real. And what is our job is to bring the light again, to draw this powerful light of Hashem into us once again. Our job is to reveal the oneness of Hashem. That is the job of Am Israel throughout the world. That's why we are scattered all over the world, to do the mitzvahs. Through the mitzvahs we reveal. For example, the mitzvah of tzitzis that we learn in this week's Torah portion is taking a talus and wrapping yourself in a talus. The talus represents the encompassing light of Hashem. But yet, the talus itself, even though the talus represents such a powerful light, it is not a mitzvah unless there is the stringes of the talus, the tzitzis that comes from the talus. These stringes represent the inner light that comes individually into each and every one of us. And that is also the idea that when you get excited about Hashem is beautiful, but you bring it down into the physical, into details, into little mitzvahs. And that what connects you and reveals the one God that brought us into our individual existence. So thank you for joining, and make sure to share this. Please just subscribe and do whatever you need to spread the word of Hashem. Any questions?